Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology, here with 2019 Astrology Part 10. Some of my own feels about the astrological happenings, the heavenly happenings of this calendar year, and how we can align our own intentions to these energies for the greatest personal growth and collective healing. All right. So we see January 1st, 2019 and January 1st, 2020 at midnight cast for San Francisco. The first video of these really kind of got into this idea of the calendar and why I start on January 1st anyway. So I'm not going to do that again, although I'm always inclined to when I show January 1st charts. Anyway, we're going to cruise in just a little bit of a quick review of the last couple parts. I spoke about the eclipses of 2019 in the 8th video of this series and showed at the end how they are linked by what is called Saros cycle to the eclipses of 2001. And we kind of got into this a little bit, and I'm happy to see that in this year, 2019, perhaps the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth will have their case heard, at least show their data and their proofs of something strange happening at that time, because the grand jury is meant to be held. And I imagine that's going to be after the July 2nd eclipse, which is the Saros return of an eclipse that came around June 21st, 2001, which itself was kind of the prenatal eclipse for the 9/11 attacks. I will say that, very importantly, the world has changed so much since that time. And this is a very painful thing for us to look at. And I think it's important for us to do just that. I think it's important for us to consider what's happened, locally, globally, and how we can choose to change this strange stream that seems to have been unleashed since that time. I mean, I'm tempted to say enough said, but really we can't say enough about it. And we will feel the eclipse of this year and the eclipses of next year, bringing us back to the things that have shifted in our own lives and in our collective lives since this time, 2001. And so I've been speaking often about this year as a year, very importantly, for dreaming in the world we wish to see. There's gateways, there's heavenly happenings of 2020 that are certainly significant. And the truth is, historically, the alignments that so many astrologers are looking forward to in next year, 2020, doesn't bode so well. That's why, most importantly, I feel 2019 is a year for us to be incredibly activated in the way that we do dreaming, collective dreaming. The challenge is to ask this question, and I offer no answer. The challenge is to ask this question of, was this a result of our collective dream? It really brings that philosophy of co-creation into a very challenging place. And we find this with astrology quite often, really, right? I mean, one of the great diverges, I guess, or schisms in astrological philosophy is fate versus free will, right? So the deterministic point of view is that, for example, your chart is like some expression of the karma that you've collected in past lives, and this is how it's going to be for you. And you can't avoid it. You might want to wear special gems this year or next or whatever, because it's going to be especially itchy, but you have basically earned, the things that you would like to scratch in this lifetime, so to speak, right? Deterministic, fate. Free will, on the other side, says that, this chart might be a roadmap for your soul's expression in this journey of a lifetime, but that you are not constricted to it, or as I really like to say, to honor both these ideas of fate and free will. The chart is like your song. And I actually mean this much more than a metaphor. It's really more like a chord than a song. At first, at least, the natal chart. The metaphor, and I again feel it is much more than a metaphor, is that each planet is like an instrument. They all have their own specific timbre, tone. And they play the note of the sign in which they reside. 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 half steps in a Western octave, 12 petals on the seed of life, geometrical construction. These things are all the number magic of nature. And that these planets like, wow, Uranus and Venus have very different instruments to play. If they're both playing Scorpio, for example, we're hearing that note twice, just played by two different instruments. But in the model, the planets surround you, which is Earth, okay? They surround the whole of Earth, not just you. Like, I'm sitting right here in this moment, and I don't know where you are, right? Or when you are, actually. But I can say that wherever and whenever you are, we could reach down through our spines and meet in the middle of our planet Earth. Whereas if we reach up, we're pointing to different stars. The above, the surface is particular, just like the culture where you're sitting likely is different than the one where I am. The weather where you're sitting is likely different than the weather where I am. And that's reflected by the houses of the chart. But the signs are emanating from Earth's heart. That's where we measure astrology from, not from the surface where we can witness the heavenly happenings and where we dwell, but rather from the center, because it is where we are all connected. The houses are the surface, signs are the center. All right. So these planets are surrounding Earth and they play this chord that is you. And it resonates in the heart of Gaia, and she broadcasts it out from there spherically in all directions. So the whole Earth is feeling this chord of the moment, like this moment now as I speak. Now, where you are on the surface completely matters, and this shows up astrologically as the houses. And in the music metaphor, well, if you're surrounded by a circle of musicians that are playing this chord, while you're hearing and experiencing the same chord, regardless of which direction you're facing within that circle, it sounds a lot different if you're facing the flute player than it does if you're facing the bassoon player or the trumpet player. You can have a different experience, through your awareness, through your direction. Whereas in the heart of you, right, you're experiencing this thing from all directions at once. And that's how Earth experiences astrology. Now, how do we get on that trip? Right, fate versus free will. So let's call this a song, because the chord of the moment that is you, in the direction of that moment, which is where you were born, this definitely speaks to the life path. I mean, we could look at a natal chart just endlessly, and we should. But we also see that the Earth did not stop spinning for you, and that the orbits did not stop, And so there's different ways to direct or progress the chart and honor that. Not only are you this wonderful moment in time, but you came from somewhere and you're going somewhere too. So you're a chord of a song. And that song for me speaks to fate. It's something that I have had to honor as an astrologer, because all the time I'm, speaking dates to people and they laugh or they cry. That's when I met the guy. That's when dad died, every time I'm just like, whoa, this stuff is real. Like how is that possible? And it just actually stokes the fuel of my own journey into what is astrology and what is the zodiac. And I'm so fascinated in unraveling a little bit of this. How does it tick? And I mean, it's one of the great things that drives me as an astrologer, not necessarily as an astrological counselor. Like in that space, I just keep the faith and go there. But that doesn't mean I'm so deep in my faith as a counselor and healer that I'm not going to allow myself the wonder and the giggle of the youth when I am surprised by how this sacred science is real. It amazes me every time. I love it, you know. So there is some idea of fate. Now, you know, that seems to buckle if you try to get very predictive. And, you know, okay, here's Uranus at your sun. You know, maybe it is that car accident that the book on the shelf suggests you should predict when this is happening for a client. And maybe in looking at that transit or that alignment and honoring it in its synchronistic appearance with some of the other things that are happening, right? Astrology, in this sense, in the predictive, or I prefer to say productive techniques of astrology, it's hard to have a clean experiment because there are so many things happening at once. Yeah. I mean, if it's just sun sign astrology, then it's only about the season. But that also begs this question of where are you looking from? Where are you living? But astrology is way more than the sun, right? All these other beings who have their own patterns and are reflecting that one light back to earth through their own voice or timbre of their instrument. All right, so there's this song of fate, but you can dance to the song any way you choose, I like to say. And that's free will. I mean, you can choose not to dance at all. And that's probably status quo. Like I have the great honor of spending my time with dancers, with spending my time with people who are choosing to go through the pain and the isolation of the weirding experience so that they are then tuned into more of this weird world and all of its beauty and pain and more, right? And then it doesn't get easier. It actually might get a lot harder, really, than it is if you're successfully collecting cars and boats and you know whatever it might be that our crazy culture is encouraging as a reflection of success or abundance, right? I mean, if you truly choose to redefine what success is for you, what abundance is for you, and choose to begin to see the heaven that's on earth and not fall prey just to, as is often the case for those of us who are starting to open our eyes to a world that was denied by the teachers we were taught to trust. It not get caught on this idea that this is only hell and we're all going down, right? But these are all, see, this is all dancing and it really is free will. It might be indicated in a natal chart if and when, more importantly, maybe when, and not just one time, it is likely for somebody to go through this experience of self-realization, or the interest in self-realization is a better, much better expression, and then choose to start being themselves in a different way and start remembering the medicine they brought to help this world be free, you see, and become more lucid in this collective dream. And talk like that is certainly not confined by some idea that our experience is completely constrained within the cell of fate. So the song and the dance, fate and free will. For me, I appreciate that cosmology, which still affords me an opportunity to make moves in this reality that were not all predetermined by the geometry of the heavenly happenings at the moment of my first breath. And yet I cannot deny, as a student of space-time and time-space, that there's certainly seen, and I shouldn't say seen, that there certainly are moments of design fate. Yeah, I guess I won't go as far as I intended to today. And maybe that this particular session is meant to be more of a philosophical happening. We'll see. Because something I just said made me wish to speak about it at the pace of Earth's grace. And suddenly it's gone. Just like that. Wednesdays, oh, the trickster. All right, so see if I can tune back in there, or maybe that was the great message, just to move along with the intent of this happening. Okay, no, actually, yeah, let me go there. And it is some of the experiments that have been done with the consciousness of water. And there are many, many incredible scientists and revolutionaries who have been looking into the waterway and the consciousness of water and the ability of water to, in a sense, absorb memory and transmit that and communicate, and the participation of human consciousness with water. And one of these scientists was Masaru Emoto. And you can find some of his work online, absolutely. The Hidden Messages in Water is one of the texts that he created, where he's looking at the crystalline structure of water and tracking and showing seemingly real-time effects and also delayed effects of human consciousness with water. So music was an interesting example that he used, that if you blast some water that's of like a beautiful crystalline structure with some Metallica or some heavy metal, that it starts getting kind of distorted. And that if you find some distorted water, like literally he was working with polluted water that was close to power plants or in dirty rivers or what it might be, and playing some Bach or some Mozart to that water, and suddenly it started changing shape. And he found that maybe the fastest way that you could realign the crystalline structure of water was through conscious, like deep conscious essence of feeling like love or gratitude or hatred. So I'll share, important, I think, for this dialogue is this experiment that Masaru Emoto suggests, that I myself have performed, and it's quite intriguing. And so what you do is you utilize rice, and I used, as he does in the book, white rice when I did this experiment. The 2 times I have achieved similar results both times, but the ones I had been told to expect. So I'm actually going to present this in a way where you could do this experiment if you choose without some expectation of the result, okay? So that would look like this. I'll just describe the experiment and you can do that. And then I'm going to tell the results of the experiment. So I'll tell you when, and you can just fast forward in this video about 90 seconds. All right. So the experiment is this: cook some rice. And find 3 containers. Okay, so you can use like a mason jar. The more sealed the container, the better, because you're going to take the cooked rice and you're going to put an equal amount in 3 of these jars, seal them up tight. All right, and you're going to write on one of these jars. So you can just take some masking tape and then write the word love. On another jar, masking tape, and write, I hate you, I want to kill you. And on the third jar, no masking tape, write nothing, right? Scientifically, that's your control. All right. And then here's the experiment. He recommended, I think, to do this in the morning. I find doing it in the evening at the end of the day when all sorts of things have happened tends to be more effective. But whichever you choose, and you can do it both or throughout the day, make sure that you are working with 2 bottles each time you check in. All right. Working with 2 and not 3, because 1 is your control, and you just leave that unmarked jar of rice alone, right? Nothing. All right. And the other 2, it's like this. You take the love jar, I love you, and you just sit with it and love it. Like, love that rice. You know, you can cradle it like a baby. You might actually want to not touch it though. You might want to, that's up to you. But you might want to just sit there and send love to this jar. At the end of the day, you might find that is easier to do if you first work with the other jar, which is I hate you, I want to kill you. So you can take the stuff at the end of the day that you might be carrying from your stress of that day and really like blow it out of proportion and hit this rice with it, man. You know, just like you know, you can tell it sternly, you can scream at it, you can do this silently, but the important part is you have that intention of like, you know, really holding that space of I hate you, I want to kill you. I'll bring in the work of another scientist, Clyde Baxter, who was working with plants and polygraphs, a machine that he invented. And he wanted to see if plants had any energetic response to human consciousness. And he was trying to get this plant that he had clipped his polygraph onto, which measures electric signals, right, to respond to all sorts of things he was saying, and nothing until he thought, I'm going to burn you, and grab some matches, and then suddenly polygraph spikes, right? And he shares later, once he had all these plants hooked up in his office, like they all freaked out at once, and it turned out that a man had just walked into the building who was a landscaper, and the plants were afraid. Interesting. I think his work is The Secret Life of Plants. I don't know, there's so many great plant titles. Clyde Baxter would be the place. So anyway, point is, you know, if you're gonna I hate you, I want to kill you with this jar of rice, go for it. Like really get in there, right? All right. And maybe after you've shed some of that stuff, maybe you're in a better space to really deeply love the other jar, the love jar. Maybe the opposite is true for you. Maybe you don't have it in you to hate rice. Maybe you don't have it in you to love rice. But that's the gig. And do this at least every day for a month, right? So cooked rice in a jar for a month. What's going to happen? And what's going to happen to your I love you jar versus I hate you, I want to kill you jar versus the jar to which the control jar with which you do nothing. Now, it's important that the jars are near one another. I mean, probably when you're projecting I hate you, I want to kill you, you want to take that jar and put it away from the other 2 so they're not experiencing that from you kind of directly. But they should be in the same temperature and lighting situations and all that. So you're doing good science, right? All right, so what's going to happen to your 3 jars? Okay. So if you choose to do this experiment, if this is not something you've heard of before and you might have an expectation of the results, the less that you can expect the results, the less that you are determining the experiment's outcome. Is that possible? Just do clean science. And I did not, because when I did this experiment, I've done it twice now. And every time I've shared this experiment with people who did the experiment, I also shared and was shared. I read what would happen before I did it. So I went in knowing the results, and then those results came around. Well, was that natural, right? Okay. So this is the point where if you choose to do this experiment yourself without wanting to know the suggested results, just fast forward this thing like 1 minute. I'll do this really quickly. Well, actually, you might actually need to stop this video now because I'm going to utilize the results of this experiment to speak about fate versus free will and the dream and this weird thing of 9/11. There are things like the Fukushima reactor meltdown and more. Okay. So, spoiler alert, right? Which of these 3 jars do you think has the greatest longevity? And by that, I mean, which of them rots at a slower pace? Okay, which one gets moldy and funky fastest? All right, so you guessed it, right? The love jar has longevity. Because you are loving and nurturing this rice, somehow your conscious participation, and if it's a good experiment with these 3 jars next to each other, whenever it is that, it is you consciously loving this, and it is also the writing of I love you on the jar itself that is literally allowing this rice, and probably, as Masaru Emoto suggests, the actual crystalline structure of the water in the rice that is preserving this rice for longer than normal. The rice lasts longer than it normally would. So, interesting. Try it. Interesting. This to me is the most interesting thing, however. It is not the I hate you, I want to kill you rice that molds the fastest. It is the one that is totally ignored. The I love you rice lasts the longest. The ignored rice rots faster than the rice that you are spending daily time hating and saying you want to kill it. What is going on here? What does this tell us? And what does that tell us about fate and free will? What does it tell us about collective consciousness? What does it tell us about animism? So many questions here. Does it remind us the importance of prayer before we eat a meal or engage in our consumption of anything? And our diet includes not only the things we eat, but the things that we choose or don't, which is probably a choice anyway, to see on a screen or on a billboard. The energies we find ourselves dancing with in our daily, weekly, whatever it may be. To me, these are the most important riddles for us to unpack if we really want to fully claim our power as co-creators in this earth game. And this is a year where we are being, like, the stakes are high, the stakes are raised. I'm like hesitant because I'm just reviewing some of my own actions over the last couple of days. And it's like, oh, bro, dial it in, clean the diet, right? Okay. Like, this might be better television than the conspiracy theory thing I checked out on YouTube last night. Although that was also very interesting. And I was listening to something about the Mandela effect. which you may or may not be hip to. It's a very strange thing. It is people who are describing experiences and sharing data of happenings in this reality that do not agree with their memory. And so I'll just share one example, and I'll ask you first and write this down. What does the witch in Snow White say before she says, "Who's the fairest of them all"? Who is she talking to? Is she talking to a crystal ball? No, she's talking to a mirror, right? What does she say? She says something on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? What does she say? Write it down. Pause this. Some of you are watching this live. Write it down. 2 words, blank, blank, on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all? Right? Okay, hopefully you've written something down. Maybe someone actually could leave this, if you're watching this live on Facebook, maybe you could leave it in the comments. What you know, the witch from Snow White said to her mirror, she says, something, something on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? Okay. Did you write down mirror, mirror on the wall? Who's the fairest of them all? That is what's written in my personal recollection of that film that I saw many times as a child. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? We'll go watch the film and you will find that it says, actually, let me say that I have not yet done this experiment and I'm interested, but I've read enough people's shock by having done the experiment that I'm in belief of what I will find when I do, which might just determine what I will find when I do. So this would be another cool place to stop this video if you really want to do the science, right? Stop this video and go watch Snow White and see what the witch says to Snow White. And if you, like me, remember her saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? See, confirm that that's what she says. Okay, go do science and come back. This will be posted on YouTube. It will be on my Facebook timeline. Report. All right. This is a fun journey today. Totally unexpected. Thank you, Magic Crystal. Oh, thank you, Magic Mirror, because that's what I am told. And again, I have not yet confirmed this with my own face and ears yet, but I'm told that the film actually says, magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Does that surprise you like it does me? Maybe that's what you already wrote down. Maybe that's what you knew the movie always said, if it does say that actually. And I just have a false memory, but I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who believes that Snow White's witch said, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. And the tale that I'm being told now is actually, the line is, magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. Now, if I go watch Snow White and I hear that, and I'm tempted to right now, actually, did I just remember it wrong? Now, what if you, like me, remember mirror, mirror? What if all of us remember mirror, mirror, and suddenly it's actually magic mirror? Did we just remember wrong? Was it some other thing talking about Snow White that somehow shifted that meaning to different languaging and we remembered? What happened? And the thing is, there's all sorts of examples of this, some of them more extreme than others. That's one that kind of touches me in the heart right there. And people call it the Mandela effect. Now, what if it's real? What if we all remember mirror, mirror on the wall, but the movie now says magic mirror on the wall? And I say now says because the idea would be somehow we shifted into a different dimension. And one of the only indicators that we did was this realignment of the script of this Snow White film. Weird play today, yeah? But what if? Is that something about how we're dancing to the song, how we collectively are expressing free will in this realm of fate? So let's bring this back to 9/11, right? Let's bring this, and I'd actually, it's hard, but it's better, I think, to show this when we speak about this happening. So I'm speaking about the 3 jars of rice, and the I love you rice lasts long. And the I hate you, I want to kill you rice rots much sooner than the I love you rice. Well, what about the ignored rice rotting the fastest of the 3? Is this ignored rice? And if so, who's the one doing the experiment? Speaking of experiments, I believe it was the folks at the Noetics Lab in Princeton, and I am not sure, but I think so. Yeah, I think this is their data. Before, well, let's just say this. On the day of the 9/11 attacks, random number generators around the world seem to have an anomaly, or seem to report what these folks were looking for. Okay, because one way they're working with monitoring the idea of collective consciousness is that they have these random number generators set up around the world, literally, okay? And the idea is that the random number generator, these are binary generators, which means they either spit out a 1 or a 0, right? An on signal or an off signal, and that's it, right? And like the statistics of flipping a coin are meant to say, it's half the time heads and half the time tails. Even more so, the statistics of the random number generator spitting out a 1 versus a 0, it's 50-50, all right? And so when you monitor these random number generators across the globe, you expect to see 50% 1s and 50% 0s. The experiment is thinking that if something extreme happens, like a spike in the collective energetic of our co-creative consciousness, that we will see a spike, that the number generators will lean towards either the 1 or towards the 0. They will release the tendency of 50% and show some trend. And I should say that there has been work where if you're facing one of these and you think 1, you can get the random number generator to lean towards the 1. And I'm talking about maybe like 50.9% or something, right? That's like statistically something. And that if you have many folks gathered around this 1, if you have people who won't fall into that 0, I'm trying to say 1, just because I want to fuck with the experiment, and I don't know that I do, which is a thing, interestingly. If you have many people 1, then it's much more likely to lean towards the 1. So the experiment now of placing them around the world is trying to, without our conscious participation, which is actually good science in this regard, trying to see if there are events where the generators will lean towards the 1 or lean towards the 0, and with no opinion about if one's good or the other is bad, just to see if it will leave the trend of 50%. And there was a spike. And there was a spike in these global random number generators at this time, which is not surprising, right? Given the miracle of, televisions everywhere and internet and whatnot. I mean, I'm sure you remember where you were when you found out about 9/11. And for most of us who were awake, we found out as it was happening. Now think if something like this had happened 1,000 years ago. Much, much less than that, 300 years ago, right? How would we find out, if ever in our lifetime? Most of us found out as this was happening. And so, of course, then it's not surprising that these random number generators, which had the intent of tracking collective consciousness, that there would be a spike, that there would be a lean. Not surprising, right? What is surprising is that the spike that was measured happened before the event. Day of, hours before. And I should be careful here because I don't know the exact time frame in that, but I'm pretty sure it was the Noetics Institute, Princeton University in New Jersey, that was performing this experiment. What about that? What is time? Is it linear? Is it cyclic? Did we somehow time travel, back to before this event and share our collective heartache and fear to spike those machines? Was there something in the air, in the fates? The astrology chart says some stuff for sure, including some Saturn-Pluto stuff, which is interesting because that's when those planets were in opposition, and in 2020, early in 2020, they will conjoin the other half of their cycle. But there's not many astrologers, maybe one, who were spreading a lot of warnings about that time, specifically about that date. When I look back, I don't see it. Hand on heart. I would like to be the master magician astrologer who can easily see that, tell you when and where. Why? Why is the questions that I'm after. Whether in a conversation like this, and I wish it were a conversation, friends, or in a counseling session, I'm after the why. And just because of the way that I'm also interested in the how. Very interested in that. Very, very interesting. So this is actually a good year for me to soften my need of how, to open my participation with the why. If you track that last expression, you and I track well. I took a peek over at the live just for a second. It's not something I'm usually monitoring here, just too many hiccups, but I saw a bunch of mirrors in the report over there, okay? So, are we in a different realm? Are we in some parallel dimension? Did you and I grow up in the mirror on the wall reality, and somehow we have shifted to the magic mirror on the wall reality? What shifted that? Was it this? Was it the crazy God particle experiments that are happening at CERN and other particle accelerators, or maybe some of the things that are happening that we're not being told about? With big, crazy, esoteric, weird science conducted by they, Is it the aliens, man? Was it Hiroshima? Or the first nuclear bomb that was tested? Did this happen? That last question I would ask for it to be stricken from my own personal record, because I find it most powerful to honor the pain and the demons in the dream. So let's play with the potentiality that we exist in the collective creation in a dream. I mean, there are many, many wisdom traditions that says this is the truth. That says this waking thing, this is the dream. And the realities that some of us can keep when we sleep at night, that's the world, that's the reality. That's hard for my own Western consciousness to get down with for most people, right? But I do like to apply some of the techniques that have been seemingly successful in the sleeping dream reality and encourage myself and those I have the honor to sit with in session, not all of them, to bring some of those lucid dreaming techniques into this reality for the sake of magical manifestation, so that we together can certainly not ignore the jar of rice, but love that jar of rice. Okay. Imagine or remember the reoccurring nightmare. Some demon is chasing you through the dreamscape. Never catches up, or when it does, you awaken. And it's pretty interesting, right? That it's often that state of deep fear and helplessness that will awaken us from a nighttime nightmare. Redundant. Running away, know where I can go, and once that fear becomes overwhelming suddenly, here we go. All right. And then the nightmare comes around again. And many people have experienced this, and I've been, member to this several times. Nothing shifts. The same nightmare they've had since they were a kid might come around for a year and disappear, might come around at length another time. But when it shifts, it seems to be when they choose to consciously dance with it. And often that coincides with them, maybe even for the first time, sharing it with someone besides, sharing it with someone else. It's a huge statement. It's a huge statement when I take this thing where it's like, okay, this makes me freaky. People are afraid of this. I can't share it. That is a huge admission of, I think I'm freaky. I can't even share this with myself. I'm terrified of it, right? But I'm not terrified enough, I guess, for it to help me awaken. But you can see the seed, where you can feel that seed in it. It's the same thing in this awakening, this waking day world is the night world, the dream world, that dream world. And so we share this with someone and they say, wow, I honor that. That sounds really painful. What is it about? I said, I don't know. What do you think? I have no idea. Your dream. But tell me more about it, right? And we know this. We've had this experience. A lot of us have had this experience. You're running from that thing in the dream, and suddenly you say, wait, why am I running? And in that moment, you become aware that you are dreaming. And now the fear softens, completely softens. And what you do at that point says a lot about where you are on your own path as a soul. As in beginning that process of self-realization. And we can dip in and out, right? There are times where we claim our superpowers, and then times where it feels like we've lost the torch, and the time where we find it again. And it doesn't mean you're off the path. The most beautiful thing about the path is you cannot leave it. It's just how you choose to dance to the song. And it's special moments, especially. And so we become lucid in the stream, and maybe we're being chased by some demonic bear, you know? And suddenly I realize I'm dreaming, I cannot be hurt. And I turn around, and I might supersize myself so I can battle the bear. More interestingly is to turn around and say, I'm not afraid of you. This is my dream. You are me. And I'm not running from myself anymore. I long to know which part of me wishes to claw at my back and scare me. I wish and choose and will and am releasing this fear and embracing my totality. And what happens to that demon bear then? It's time for some teddy cuddles. You know, I mean, that's a pretty standard thing in like the lucid dreaming shape. You know, one expression of a pretty standard theme. Now, how do we do that in this dream? How do we do that with this demon? Are we willing collectively? Am I willing personally? Are you willing personally to say, this is me? This bear clawing at my back that I can only run away from. Are you willing to do this and to put all of the politics and all of the stories aside for a moment and just feel the response of your heart and your body? We've been talking about the swamp thing this year and that training of our sensing experiences to clear the mind, bring it back online. Are you willing to run into this, to dive into this tidal way instead of run away from it? Because perhaps when we dive, we will find some clarity and some peace on the other side. Are we willing to honor in our collective reality, just have we, you, me, when I'm on my game, when we're on our game, just like we have in our individual lives, learn to embrace some of the most painful things that we have been through. To embrace them, to love them. It is very rare for a mystic, and that's you, to have had a loving, graceful, easy relationship with both of their parents. To have a stressful relationship or a non-relationship with one or both of the parents seems to be one of the key ingredients or the shared symbols in this awakening effort of the collective dream for each mystic that I've met. As is the isolation when we have to feel how weird we are for choosing to dance, you know, because that is weird in this world, you know, which is weird. But that isn't forever. And in fact, we'll get back into it, but there's very important messages of this year that say, come into your family, be with your tribe, be with your crew, call that in, know who that is, bring that part of your dream into reality, not just people that we can speak to through these worldwide waves, but go to the retreats, meet your crew, the 19-second hug, heart to heart, like really drop into the monkey suit, be the swamp thing, bring spirit into matter. Fire in the earth. And so one of the great shifts for the mystic in the heart, in the power of that magic, is releasing the need for the relationship with the difficult parent to look like this and to not look like this. Releasing, I need it to look like this, is the pathway to releasing, it always will look like this. Aliens, which means I have to go. Without really speaking astrology today, so I guess I'll change the title of this flow. But it actually did set the stage for some of the powerful aspects and planetary happenings of 2019, of 2020, and hopefully brings a few more pieces and seeds into this soil of the importance of us tuning into the power we have as the dreamers of this reality. Because I will show this painful thing once again. If we can take responsibility for our co-creation, if we can do this in our own lives, if we can say, wow, that parent that I have a tricky relationship with, shifting from that sucks for me to, wow, that is the coolest thing, that broken heart was my heart breaking open so I could tune into the power of this magic that I hold. That painful experience of my life was the greatest gift, wrapped in disturbing paper, but the greatest gift. For I would in no way be who I am or be on this path of self-realizing had I not had the shock that broke me open into my awakening. Will this collective nightmare carries a kernel for a catalyst of collective awakening, for us to realize our powers, to see why individually I can consciously guide the longevity of a jar of rice, or somehow collectively shift from a mirror to a magic mirror, importantly, reality, somehow. The shadow cycles, the dragon cycles of 2019 and 2020 are asking us to remember this. And not just to encourage us to react and go through the pain and the grief. And that's very important. This is a year of passion, and this will invoke passion for you if you truly choose to go there. And that is a hard thing to do. It's hard for me. But there are twin flowers available for our collective co-creation and our awareness of our magical powers as dreamers of this reality. There are twin flowers in the dark soil of these twin towers. And it's something I was very devoted to personally some years ago and let it go. And now I understand that I need to embrace these demons in my nightmare, to become lucid within the beauty of this dream and remember the power I have to dream forward a better way. because we are at a precipice, friends. As we say, we are the ones we've been waiting for, and realizing that we've always been here, and that everything in our lives is part of the brushstrokes that we've been applying to this collective canvas, is a huge part of giving ourselves permission to make the shift. Love and planets to you, friends. May this have confirmed what you have always known. May it have opened new windows of contemplation, practice, and play. And in true Gemini fashion, may it have brought more questions and answers. From my heart to yours, thank you for drinking Astrology with me today.